Blog Talk Radio.
Fulfill Radio, a voice you can trust. Broadcasting live presents Two Guys and a Bible with Don Preston and William Bell. Join us each week at 7 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Central as we bring you exciting, sound, challenging, and comforting messages regarding the end times. Thank you for tuning in today. Don Preston is the founder of Preterist Research Institute, or PRI. Don is a prolific author, having written and published 19 books, a host of audio and DVD studies, and is a debater and defender of the full preterist view. His websites are BibleProphecy.com, Eschatology.org, and DonKPreston.com. William Bell is the founder of AllThingsFulfilled.com Ministries and has a website bearing the same name, and has authored 3 books, audios, and DVDs. He has published hundreds of articles and recordings. And now, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Two Guys and a Bible broadcast with Don Preston and William Bell.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. This is William Bell, and we're waiting on Don Preston. Don, if you're out there and you can hear me, press 1 on your phone. I wasn't able to log in, so I'm using my cell phone. I may have to try to go to another format and see if I can get in. But I show where, I can see that I'm in, but I can't tell where you are, so I don't see your phone at all. And if you can hear me, let's see if I can get a message to you here. Ladies and gentlemen, give us a few minutes. We're trying to work out some technical issues. Let's see. And we'll just send him a message. Okay, there he is.
Hello, William.
Okay, hang on. Yes, how are you doing?
Well, I've been trying for the last 5 minutes to dial in on the computer like normal, and I kept not being able to get on. I kept getting a message that says internal error, so I'm calling you on my cell phone.
Look, I'm on my cell phone too.
Okay.
I couldn't log in, and Skype wouldn't dial, so I just dialed in on my cell phone, and so here I am.
Yeah,
all right.
Yeah.
Well, good to hear from you, and it seems like you've been pretty busy lately. I know you always are. I wondered if you had some projects going or something.
Oh, just I would say just the normal stuff, but you know, the correspondence, the research. As you know, William, I'm doing a book right now on the Sabbath, and the name of the book is Celebrating the Eighth Day, and it's just such exciting research. I'm finding it very, very difficult to pull myself away from that to engage in a lot of Facebook exchanges and other stuff. And what's fascinating is everyone that I share the concept and the idea and the fact that I'm doing this book on the Sabbath, they get very, very excited. It seems that it's really, although I don't see a lot of it on Facebook or YouTube, it is a subject that when you talk to individuals that they really, they're very, very interested in it.
Yeah, well, there's always been a lot of interest in the Sabbath, and I've noted that from early on. Leora used to ask me to, to write some things because even people on her job, would ask about it from time to time. So I know that it's, one of those top of mind topics out there that people want to hear about. So it'd be good to have that, and especially to, focus on the eighth day as well. I know we've talked about that for some years, and so you're finally getting around to writing on it. So that's good.
Yeah, and of course, one of the exciting things about it is, as you and I and countless private conversations, and as well as on the program, we've tied in the significance of Israel's festal calendar with the topic of eschatology. And the subject of the Sabbath and the eighth day is just, it's a perfect segue into a discussion of the feast days, and vice versa. The discussion of the feast days segues perfectly into a discussion of the Sabbath. And this eighth day concept, the Hebrew term is Shemonai Atzerat. And I was turned on to the incredible significance of this by my good friend Jim Wade from Texas. And I was talking to him on one occasion, telling him that I was doing a book on the Sabbath, and he said, well, have you looked into Shemonai Atzerat? And I guess I looked at him like a deer in a headlight. I'd never even heard the term until that very day, and he began to share some stuff with me that just literally blew my mind. And, of course, I've shared a lot of that with you since then. And I had a gentleman at the office yesterday that is a very, very good Bible student. Matter of fact, he's been a Bible college professor. And he was there to talk about some issues. He is a full preterist. He actually got kicked out of one college for his preterist views. But anyway, he was asking me what book I was working on, and I told him I'm working on Celebrating the Eighth Day, Shemonai Atzerat, and he looked at me like I looked at Jim Wade some years ago. I could tell that he had never heard of the term, and that's what he told me. He said, I've never heard that term in my life until this moment. And when I shared with him some of the concepts related to it, he got really, really excited. And so when I see that kind of response from very, very well-read, very well-educated people that are in many aspects very familiar with biblical eschatology, like I said, this fella is a full preterist. He is a PhD. He's been a college professor, all this kind of stuff. And when he gets excited about it, in spite of the fact that you've never even heard of the concept before, then it really becomes exciting to me.
Well, good. It's always good to see that people are eager to hear about, developments in various studies, and that's very encouraging. Helps, to really focus on them and look to know you got an audience out there who's waiting on them, when they're ready. So that's excellent.
Yeah, very exciting.
Fantastic. All right. Well, the weather's beginning to change here a little bit. I guess that's good, even though it was a little warm today. I just, got in about 30 minutes ago, and it was a little hot out there, but I noticed the night has begun to get cooler, so I'm sure some people will welcome the change in the weather. Maybe the ones here, I don't know how it is for people where the weather is going to get extremely cold. But anyway, we're, grateful for a little cool down.
Yeah, it's been very, very pleasant here. Fall has definitely started to fall here. You get up of a morning, you definitely need a jacket. And, of course, I'm about halfway cold-blooded anyway, and I get cold very, very easily. And so I've worn a jacket most of the day here. I don't often welcome cold weather. I can tell you that. It's just not my time of year.
Well, I'm generally good in the daytime. I mean, I have a fan running now. But at night, when all the sun's gone down and it's dark and then things get cold and damp, that's when cold weather affects me more. But during the day, I'm okay unless it's, like extremely cold.
Right.
And Leo and I are almost just the very opposite,
Well, we've been struggling here in the Preston household because Jan, with the medications from her cancer treatments, is having hot flashes. And so one moment she'll be just fine, and the other moment, she is throwing cover off of the bed, fanning the blanket.
No more.
Yeah. And she, we're kind of snugglers. when we go to bed and go to sleep. But snuggling just doesn't work.
Yeah. You have to pick your nights.
That's exactly right. Exactly right. So it's quite a struggle trying to adapt to this new situation. But it's okay. As long as she's healthy, that's all that matters.
Well, that's good. That's good.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, William, we wanted to start reviewing another one of the lessons at the Power Lectureship that was given at the Southaven Church of Christ earlier this year. And one of the speakers was Drew Leonard. And many of our listeners will know that Drew Leonard debated Steve Bazin earlier in this year as well. And I can tell you right now, as a direct result of that debate, there are some people that were, shall we say, on the fence, but are no longer on the fence. They're now fully persuaded of covenant eschatology. And as I sat and listened to Brother Leonard's presentation at that lectureship, and I know that you had to have felt this same identical way, within the first 7 minutes of his presentation, he had made enough admissions and had made enough points in agreement with covenant eschatology that as I listened, I just thought, all he can do from this point forward is make quibbling arguments about covenant eschatology. All that he can do from this point to the rest of his presentation is to contradict himself and contradict the brethren that were in the audience listening to him. I absolutely could not help but think that as Drew Leonard made one point after another, there had to have been men in that audience who were putting their head in their hand, shaking their head, going, "He's giving the farm away. Somebody needs to stop this young man." I had listened to a little bit of it in the past, but as I listened even more carefully today in preparation for this evening's program, I was absolutely astounded at the admissions that he made that are literally fatal to any objection to the preterist view. And the great part of his admissions had to do with the time statements of Scripture and the time statements of imminence. And I was just flabbergasted because, as you and I very well know, at the Bellevue Church of Christ lectures, we had men such as Doug Post agreeing that at hand means at hand, soon, quickly, and shortly mean that very thing. But then, of course, there were other men in that audience who would try to convince us that, oh, well, hey, at hand doesn't necessarily mean near time-wise. It just means spatially near. That is to say, near in location. Has nothing to do with time. And, of course, you and I sat at our table in my second debate with David Hester, which was in Montgomery, Alabama, in June of this year. And David Hester committed one entire presentation seeking to deny that at hand, quickly, shortly, and soon carries any temporal meaning with it. And so here was Drew Leonard standing up and saying, "Brethren, if time statements do not have a temporal significance, they have no significance at all." And I just thought to myself, we need to set up a debate between David Hester and Drew Leonard.
We could have.
I think that would be awesome.
Oh yeah, yeah. You could have many of those types of debates.
Oh sure. I agree 100. I agree 100%. I mean, you could just you could start lining up a series of debates on between members of the Churches of Christ in the amillennial world, between those individuals who say that the miraculous gifts and inspiration ceased by AD 70, and those who say that the gifts of the Holy Spirit continued until the 2nd century, until the last person upon whom the apostles laid their hands died out. You could have public debates between those who accept the early dating of the book of Revelation and the application of the fall of Jerusalem, such as Doug Post, such as Drew Leonard, even though Drew Leonard wanted to throw Rome into the mix, and those who say, oh, no, the book of Revelation was written absolutely in the 90s and has to do with the yet future destruction of the Roman Catholic Church and the papacy. And you could have, which we have seen and witnessed, you could have debates between members of the church who say that the man of sin is the Roman Catholic Church, and those who say, no, the man of sin was probably a first century individual. And we could just keep going here, because there is tremendous, and I'll use the term, division within the amillennial world representative of the Churches of Christ, of men who take diametrically opposed positions on major eschatological texts. I mean, William, you and I both know how divided the amillennial world of the Churches of Christ is when it comes to the Olivet Discourse. There are those in the Churches of Christ who say, well, all of Matthew 24 and 25 was AD 70, and then others on the other side, probably the majority of you, say, no, the Olivet Discourse talks about the fall of Jerusalem in verses 4 to 34, and after that it talks about the end of the world. Then there are those, and Burton Kaufman was one of them, who says, well, throughout the entirety of the Olivet Discourse, you'll have one verse talking about AD 70, and the very next verse with no indication whatsoever of a change in subject, but it will be talking about the end of time, and God did that purposely to prevent the disciples from thoroughly understanding the eschatological narrative. That's what Burton Kaufman taught.
I think
and so, go ahead.
I was saying, I think Gus Nichols taught the same thing.
Yes.
I'm not sure, but I think he did. I recall back when I listened to those lectures, looking at some information from him or reading again the Nichols-King debate. It's in one of his writings, either in a lecture or something, but that was the position that he took. I mean, I was just shocked, even though I'd heard others take that position. And actually, I hadn't heard anybody take it since one of the elders at the congregation where I, was baptized, and that's been years ago. He was the only person that I heard said, Jesus was going in and out of the verse from one to the other.
To purposely confuse the disciples.
Well,
that's really one
I don't
of the
know that
shocking
he said
things
that much, but that's
right,
really unique.
Yeah, I understand that. But Burton Kaufman did. Burton Kaufman just openly stated he did this to prevent the disciples from understanding. Now, that's an amazing statement if ever there was one.
It is. That's classic.
So, anyway, I was completely stunned once again as I heard Drew Leonard just, in a way, I don't know if it struck you this way or not, William, but it almost struck me that Drew Leonard was almost chiding those that he knew were in the audience who rejected time statements. It just all, yeah. I mean, he was just saying we can't reject these time statements. God means what he says.
Yeah, I mean, he was kind of doing, it might not have been direct, but it was obvious enough for you to sense it or to feel what he was doing, because that was similar to what Doug Post did at the Bellevue lectures when he argued for the early date of Revelation, and or at hand, maybe it was the phrase at hand, and
yes.
Saying that it meant that those things were at hand, and anybody who disagreed with him were just wrong. So he kind of chided them as well. Maybe in good humor, but he did.
Well, I thought it was interesting in Doug Post's presentation that he almost flippantly said what you just suggested there, and that is that if anyone disagreed with him, that's okay. You have a right to be wrong if you want to. I'm not gonna withdraw from you, or something to that effect, as I remember it. But it's just it strikes one as humorous and significant that you have men like Doug Post and men like Drew Leonard who are standing in front of audiences that by and large would just categorically disagree with their comments is a center of focus in the book of Revelation, and telling them, look, guys, you're wrong, and you need to get on board here. And Drew Leonard, in this presentation, just said, brethren, do not get in a discussion with these theorists on the book of Revelation. Just don't do it. I was just like, well, if that's not a statement of raise the white flag, I don't know what it is. That just says he understands that he cannot and they cannot win the debate if the debate is on the book of Revelation. Now, if that's not significant, folks, because, he said they're going to tell us, these, and he liked to use the term theorist to refer to us, but he said these theorists are going to say all prophecy, all of the book of Revelation was fulfilled by AD 70. Okay, give them that. Give them that and move on. Don't argue with that. And I thought, okay, if you are going to give Revelation to us, you have surrendered the entire study of eschatology to fulfillment in AD 70. You can't say all of Revelation was fulfilled in AD 70 and then turn around and say, oh, well, yeah, but there's still, we're still waiting for the coming of the Lord. Wow. That is absolutely incredible. One of the, William, one of the things that just, this really stood out to me, and that is, these theorists make such a huge case, and they build their case on the Greek word mello. And I sat there and I thought, this young man hasn't done enough reading. I understand, and I believe, and I have said, that an argument most assuredly can be made, and be made effectively, based on the Greek word mello. I have said, you have said, and others have said, I do not build my theology of fulfillment in AD 70 on the Greek word mello. And so for Drew Leonard to stand up there and to say, well, these theorists build their case on the Greek word mello is really a pretty serious misrepresentation. And so, as is so often the case, our opponents build a straw man. And they proceed to tear down a straw man, in other words, an argument that is not true, and then they proclaim that they have carried the day, that they have won the debate, when in reality, they're making really, really bad arguments. I don't know if you caught his claim, William. You probably did, but he noted that, I want to come back to Romans 8, by the way. He made a point about Jim McGuigan's argument on Romans chapter 8 and 18 on Mello. Again, I want to come back to that. But he says, if you can find even one case, one example, where Mello does not indicate imminence, their whole case falls. I was stunned, to be honest about it, that someone would make that radical of a claim of linguistics. I just, to me, it demonstrates an incredible lack of thought, an incredible lack of logic to say, okay, if I can find one example where a word normally used in a given way does not or is not used in that normal way, then the normal definition is completely destroyed. And this is what was troubling to me. He said Mello absolutely does not indicate imminence. Well, evidently, Brother Leonard has not read the Blaster-Brunner grammar of New Testament Greek and other literature, because under item number 6, it's either 356 or 365, I've forgotten which. If anyone wants the reference, I can give it to them. But Blaster-Brunner is still considered to this day to be one of the leading Greek grammars available. And in that Greek grammar, it says, Meline, with the infinitive, indicates imminence. That's a direct quote. And so for Drew Leonard, who I don't believe has a degree in Greek, but for him to stand on a stage and to claim Mello does not indicate imminence shows to me that he has not actually done his homework. And it's interesting to me that he did cite Thayer, and Thayer is one of the lexicons that emphasizes certainty over imminence, but he nonetheless lists about to be as a primary definition. And by the way, I have numerous lexicons in my library, as you do, and virtually every one of them lists the root definition of Mello as to be about to be on the point of. And so it's really kind of sad in a way, and it's disturbing very definitely, when you have a guy to stand in front of an audience and just simply boldly say, Mello does not indicate imminence. I have reference after reference after reference from some of the greatest Greek commentators in the world today. And I'm talking everything from the Word Biblical Commentary to the New International Greek Testament Commentary. You name it. Some of the finest commentators by men whose credentials, academic credentials, are beyond dispute, and in quotation after quotation after quotation, these men say that Mello indicates imminence. So I think we would have a perfect right to ask Brother Leonard, what are your credentials for challenging Donald Hagner when commenting on Matthew chapter 3, verse 7, and John saying, who warned you to flee from the wrath that is about to come? Donald Hagner makes the comment, what troubled his audience so much was not only the fact that he preached judgment, but the fact that he said it was coming soon, that it was imminent. And he gives the Greek of the text as justification for that interpretation. And the same is true in Romans chapter 8 of the different commentators. And again, I could give source after source after source of men whose academic credentials are absolutely undisputed, and they render Mello as indicating imminence. And so I just simply repeat the statement that it's troubling when a young man who does not stand in that group of world-class academics. And yet he boldly says that Mello simply does not indicate imminence. These men say it does. And, it's troubling as well when we stood up and we heard David Hester talk about Mello and give his trite argument on the meaning of Mello from one particular individual. Now, the individual was a PhD. We appreciate the credentials. But he is one man. What's the old cliche? What was that song, Spitting Against the Wind? and so, it's just troubling. It really is troubling when you have somebody like Drew Leonard making his outlandish claims.
That's certainly true. When they talk about Mello, they generally cite, the reference from Curtis Cate that he published in a little.
Can you speak up a little bit, William? I think you're a little far away from your phone.
Okay, I have to forget. I got a headset on with long cord. All right, is that better?
Yes,
okay,
that's
good.
much better.
Yeah. I was going to say that generally the reference that they use to refute Mello or to claim that it has no temporal significance whatsoever is from Dr. Curtis Cate, who, of course, has passed on now. He was the president over at the school, and they cited from Acts 26, verses 22 and 23. And at the same time, in these various passages where you find Mello, some of which, we've had this conversation with Kenneth Gentry, Dr. Gentry before, and trying to eliminate the temporal significance of Mello in resurrection texts, such as Acts 24, and verses 14 and 15. However, you run into parallel passages on these texts that literally mention the word at hand. And I know that, with the exception of a few terms, at hand is pretty much universally accepted by, most of these brethren as having temporal significance. It has only been since they have encountered preterists, covenant eschatology, that they begin to backtrack on the meaning of at hand. Because if a premillennialist, dispensationalist, etc., were to have made the argument that at hand was not at hand, and who knows, maybe if they had made some on Mello, that would be interesting to watch as well. But
it would indeed.
But, they would entertain no idea of it not having any temporal significance. The two passages he brought up, well, actually he brought up a few of them, but the two passages that Curtis Cate brought up in particular was Acts 26, 22, and 23, and then Romans 5 and 14. So, when you take the Romans text, what's the problem with his interpretation on that passage?
My problem. I'm sorry. Go right ahead.
No. Go ahead. No. I was really asking the question.
I didn't know if you were asking me for me to answer it or whether you were asking a rhetorical question.
I was. I'm assuming the role of reporter here, of interviewer here.
Well, you go ahead first, and then I'll chime in on it.
All right. Well, in Romans 5 and 14, the text says, and I'll just read it, it says, "Nevertheless, death reigned from Adam to Moses, even over those who had not sinned according to the likeness of the transgression of Adam, who is a type of him," and the literal rendering is, "of him who is about to come." If I'm not mistaken, I think it's the present tense in that text. But at any rate, you have the term Mello there, and what the concept is, this is what these guys do. They want to claim that Christ had already come, that this is a reference to his incarnation or his public ministry, etc. But that is not what the text is teaching.
That's right.
The text is it's an eschatological focus in the text. Death reigned from Adam to Moses. And throughout the covenant of Moses was the reigning of death. However, through the death, burial, and resurrection of Christ and the parousia, his atonement, death was defeated. So what he's saying is that he was a type of him who was coming. You could actually read it from that perspective, because at the time Paul wrote, Christ's coming was yet future. It would occur in 70 A.D., and that is the way the text should be read. So the significance of Mello as temporal in this text is valid. Adam was a type of him who was coming to undo the death that occurred that had reigned from Adam to Moses. And every Church of Christ preacher I know, in terms of an amillennialist who still take the futurist view, argue that Christ is yet to come to do away with death. Now, until death is done away, and it's not that I agree with that position, but they do agree that it's the coming of Christ where the death of Adam is reversed, which is 1 Corinthians 15. And you've been teaching, for almost a year on that now. But Here's the deal. If death has not been done away, then Adam is yet a type of him who is coming, because it wasn't done away, certainly not in any consummated sense when Jesus died on the cross.
That's exactly right. Yeah, and I think one of the things that troubles me is the hermeneutic that was stated so vociferously by Drew Leonard that I noted a few moments ago. He said, if you can find one example where Mello is not or does not indicate imminence, you have destroyed their entire argument. I wonder if Brother Leonard would accept that hermeneutic on any other subject. You have a subject, or you have a word, a subject, whether a subject or a verb or whatever it might be, and it is used absolutely consistently. And the lexicons give the definition of it. And then what happens? You find one example where that word does not mean or does not carry its normal, regular meaning in a given context. Now, since we're talking about Drew Leonard, he's a member of the Churches of Christ. Okay, when we read the term or read the word baptism, favorite topic among the Churches of Christ preachers, then Drew Leonard would say, well, what does baptism mean? It means to be immersed, okay? And he would say it means to be immersed in water. Well, wait a minute. If, therefore, I can find one exception to that rule, to that normal usage, then I have completely destroyed the normal argument for baptism and immersion in water. Okay, Jesus told his disciples, I have a baptism to be baptized with. Are you able to be baptized with this? And Jesus was not talking about immersion in water. He was talking about his experience, the overwhelming baptism of suffering. But wait a minute. Drew Leonard's argument would be, if you can find one text, one use of a word that doesn't carry its normal definition, then it destroys all of the other references to it. It's a horrible hermeneutic. And we've made that argument over and over and over and over down through the years, that you cannot run to an exceptional use of a word. And by exceptional, I mean out of the norm. You cannot run to that and say, see, I've proven that your use of that word in all of these other texts, I've proven that's wrong because I found an exception to that usage. He would not accept that argument. And yet we are hearing over and over and over again, whether it is on Mello or just like David Hester, to refer to that debate again, in my debate with him in June of this year, David Hester gets up and he picks out a couple of Old Testament passages that he claims, falsely I might say, that he claimed did not carry with it in those given contexts the idea of imminence. He claimed they carried the meaning of hundreds of years. And therefore, his argument was, that means that when James said the coming of the Lord is at hand, that doesn't mean anything at all. That can involve 2,000 years. When Peter said, the end of all things has drawn near, well, that doesn't really mean it was imminent. Of course, then he turned around and admitted that 1 Peter chapter 4 did refer to AD 70. But it just shows you so powerfully the utter desperation that is just running rampant through the ranks of those attempting to refute covenant eschatology. This is, as I have said over and over and over again, I've said it in public debates, I've said it in public sermons, I've said it in private conversations, I've said it in articles, I will continue to do so. Anytime you have a hermeneutic that is that corrupted, that illogical, then it is your theology that has just been disproven, that has been falsified. And in a similar way, we hear people saying, like Joel McDermott did, for instance, in my formal debate with him, July of 2012, in response to my affirmative, in which I correlated 1 Corinthians 15 with Isaiah 24 through 27, and showed the historical context of those prophecies, that they are the same prophecies. He got up and said, well, I don't see the word final in Isaiah 24 or 25. Therefore, they're not talking about final resurrection. Well, I got up and made the counter argument, I don't see the word final resurrection in 1 Corinthians 15 either. Yet you believe that's what it's talking about. And, of course, he couldn't answer that. But this argument that because a given specific word is not in a given text means that the doctrine is not there. I had an individual post a response to one of my YouTube videos, one of them in which I've been sharing over the last few days, that the law that was the strength of sin was the Mosaic law. He tried to make the argument, I don't see the term Mosaic law in 1 Corinthians 15 at all. Therefore, I think your point is invalid. I'm just going, my goodness, where are people getting this hermeneutic at? I mean, this is absolutely horrible. And yet, they seem to think it's some kind of an argument, but it's not. Now, I want to turn our attention, because Drew Leonard called his audience's attention to the argument that Jim McGuigan made in his debate with Max King. Max King made the argument that the word Mello appears in Romans chapter 8, verse 18 and following. I reckon that the sufferings of this present time are not worthy to be compared with the glory that is about to be revealed in us. Well, Max King pointed out that the word Mello carries with it imminence, the idea of imminence. And, of course, Jim McGuigan demurred from that, rejected that argument, and just simply said that's just false. And, I've just got to tell you, anyone who's read that debate, in fact, this gentleman that was in my audience in my office yesterday that I have already mentioned, we got to discussing the McGuigan-King debate. And as I have commented many times in the past, I read the McGuigan-King debate because I had started being accused of being a Kingite and didn't even know what it was, didn't understand what it was. And so, but I knew who Jim McGuigan was, and I had a tremendous amount of respect for him. I thought he was one of the finest Bible students that I knew of. And the more I learned about Max King and the more I was accused of being a Kingite, I heard about the debate. And I thought, well, I've absolutely got to get this because everyone says I'm a Kingite, and that means I'm being labeled a false teacher and a heretic and blah, 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 blah. So if anybody can set me straight, it would be Jim McGuigan because he is a fantastic Bible scholar. And I got the debate, and I read it. And when I put it down, I literally said to myself, I'm in a lot of trouble here. Because Jim McGuigan did a terrible job in that debate. He absolutely, I don't remember a single point that he made in attempting to refute Max King that made me go, aha, there you go. Go get him, Jim McGuigan. I don't remember even one. I sit there going, wow. I don't know who this Max King guy is, but boy, he's making some really good arguments. Now, in retrospect, I can go back and read some of Max's arguments, and I'm sure he would do this as well because I certainly do it in my retrospective look at some of my past debates. I go back and look and go, oh, man, I should have said this. I should have said that. I could have said this, could have said that. And so I read that debate now, and I say, oh, Max, you could have nailed him to the wall with the following argument. And again, I'm sure Max is aware of that, and that's not in any way a criticism of Max King in that debate. But he did a sufficiently successful job that it caused me to know that if Jim McGuigan couldn't defeat Max King, basically nobody else could. And it really, really made me dig even deeper into this entire subject of eschatology. And it just simply confirmed what I was seeing on the pages of Scripture that I thought I was seeing. And Jim McGuigan tried to convince everybody, no, that's not what that's saying. And Brother King just came along and, yeah, that's exactly what that's saying. So on Romans chapter 8, Drew Leonard, claimed that Jim McGuigan basically carried the day in his argument. Well, he was a long way off. In the first place, I want to point this out. We started out, William, by pointing out how we could have some really good debates between members of the Church of Christ on the different and varying views on eschatology. Right. Well, we could take Jim McGuigan's view of the redemption of creation in Romans chapter 8 and have somebody, just a person, on 2 Peter chapter 3. For instance, Wayne Jackson would be a good example of that. Wayne's advanced in years now. But Wayne Jackson took the view on 2 Peter chapter 3 that the earth is completely, utterly destroyed at the so-called end of time. Jim McGuigan took the position, and as far as I know still does, that earth will be completely renovated. We will have a new heaven and a new earth, a literal new earth that has been purged by fire and then recreated. So see, there's just another debate we could have between members of the Churches of Christ on eschatology. And those of us who are believers in covenant eschatology can sit back and go, okay, we'll take on the winner here. But here's what I wanted to get to on Romans chapter 8. And this is something that struck me years ago, for instance, as I was doing my linguistic studies. And I will share this little anecdote, William. years and years and years and years and years ago, my goodness, probably 78, 79, perhaps as late as 1980, but it wouldn't have been any later than that. I could see that I was very firmly headed toward the view that Christ had come. The judgment was in AD 70. The resurrection was in AD 70. I was still trying desperately to hold on to 1 Corinthians 15, Romans 8, 1 Thessalonians 4. And, of course, in 1981 is when I called you, 81 or 82, right along in there. But prior to that, I was trying really, really, really hard to hold on to a futurist view of 1 Corinthians 15 and Romans 8. In fact, I believe that Romans 8 was absolutely futurist. And so in order to save myself, I began writing a book on Romans chapter 8 because my position at that time was, okay, I've got all of these passages that talk about the coming of the Lord is at hand, coming soon, near, quickly, shortly, et cetera, et cetera. I can see those are AD 70. Okay. But Romans chapter 8 is resurrection. Romans chapter 8 cannot be AD 70. So I thought, okay, I'm going to write this book. I'm going to write this manuscript. It's going to be for me, but if somebody else wants a copy, that's fine. Okay. Well, I started writing it, and I got about 100 pages into it. And I very, very, very quickly realized that my attempt to hang on to Romans 8 was going away. It just simply wasn't going to work. And one of the things that I discovered was, of course, Mello. So I was trying to negate Mello. But here's what I encountered, and I've been making this argument ever since. If you want to argue that Mello of itself does not mean imminent, my argument will be, number one, the lexicons say that the primary definition is about to be on the point of. My second point will be this. Anytime the word Mello is used in a context in which other words of imminence are present and undeniable, then the imminence factor of Mello is heightened and magnified. I believe that's a very, very valid point to be made. And let me illustrate this. In Romans chapter 8, as Paul discusses the redemption of creation, I think it's very important, and by the way, in my book, Elijah Has Come, a solution to Romans 11, 25 to 27. I discussed this at length, but in Romans chapter 8, we have all sorts of elements, motifs, and themes that demand imminence and imminent fulfillment of Romans chapter 8. I want you to notice Romans chapter 8, verse 17. If you're children, then you're heirs, heirs of God and joint heirs of Christ. If so be that we suffer with him, we may be also glorified with him. Well, here's Paul talking about martyrdom for the cause of Christ and being glorified, i.e., vindicated for that suffering. Question: when did Jesus say that the suffering of all the martyrs, all the way back to creation, would be vindicated and judged? Well, it's unequivocal, Matthew 23, 34 and following, that all of the blood of all of the righteous, all the way from Abel unto Zechariah son of Berechiah, whom you slew between the temple and the altar, would be avenged in that generation. There's no question at all about when all of the martyrs will be vindicated. And Jesus said, behold, I send you prophets, wise men, and scribes, some of them you shall crucify and scourge and chase from city to city, that upon you may come all this righteous blood. And he said to Jerusalem, to the Jews of his day, fill up then the measure of your father's guilt. Well, guess what, folks? The theme of martyrdom runs throughout the book of Romans. As I document in the book that I mentioned a moment ago, Elijah has come, a solution in Romans 11, 25 to 27. So the point I'm trying to make here is in Romans 8:17, Paul is setting his discussion of the redemption of creation within the context of the suffering of that present time, because he says, I reckon that the sufferings of this present time are not worthy to be compared with the glory that is about to be revealed. Well, what was the glory about to be revealed? It was the vindication for the suffering that they were enduring at that very present time. Folks, that's imminence. That's undeniable imminence. And it's imminent vindication at the coming of the Lord in AD 70, according to Jesus in Matthew chapter 23. Now, we've got the theme of martyr vindication. Now, notice what Paul goes ahead to say. He says, the earnest expectation of the creature, or creation, if you please, eagerly awaits the manifestation of the Son of God. Well, it's important here to notice the word that is translated as the earnest expectation is from the Greek word apokaradokia. And this is a compound word, and it's, if I can translate it like this, to look with neck out. And all of the Greek authorities talk about how strong of a term it was. In the ancient church writers, it was a word that was used for a strong expectation. So here we have Paul in the context of the promise of martyr vindication, which will be in AD 70. And he says, and talks about the glory that is about to be revealed. Well, the glory would be at the time of their vindication in AD 70. And here's Paul writing in approximately 57 to 59 AD, talking about the about to be vindication, the about to be glory. Why isn't that imminence? And then he says, the earnest expectation of the creation eagerly awaits. Well, now he uses another word, apekdekomai, which is an expectant looking for, an expectant expectation. In other words, you're not kicked back in your easy chair saying, well, when it happens, it happens, or it'll happen one of these days. Maybe. Nobody knows when, but hey, it'll happen. No. Apekdekomai is a word that carries with it very, very strong sense of imminence. In Hebrews chapter 9, verse 28, and now to those who eagerly look for him, he shall appear again the second time apart from sin for salvation. Oh, why were they eagerly expecting him? Well, it's because Hebrews 10:37 says, and now, in a very, very little while, the one who is coming will come and will not delay. Well, by the way, Drew Leonard believes that Hebrews 10:37 applies to AD 70. Okay, if Hebrews 10:37 applied to AD 70, then why doesn't the eager looking for, the expectant looking for of that time of salvation, which is the time of the great reward of Hebrews 10:35 to 39, the same thing? And so we have so many elements in Romans chapter 8 that absolutely demand imminent fulfillment. You have the theme of martyr vindication. You have Mello associated with martyr vindication. You have apokaradokia, to look with the neck outstretched and you have apekdekomai, which means the expectant looking for, because it's so imminent you expect to see it. Well, William, it looks to me like the end has drawn near. The time has come. And so we'll have to pick this up again next week as we continue our examination of Brother Drew Leonard's presentation at the Power Lectureship there in Mississippi. In the meantime, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us here on Two Guys and a Bible on Fulfilled Radio, a voice you can trust. And with that, I'm going to say good night and God bless.
Thank you for joining the Two Guys and a Bible radio broadcast. On behalf of Dunn Preston and myself, we'd like to say have a very pleasant day and may God bless. Until next time, we'll see you on Fulfill Radio, a voice you can trust.